All right. Welcome back to Anti-War Radio. This is Angela Keaton for KS 95.9 and Anti-War Radio. On the line with me today, we have Professor David Henderson, Research Fellow at the Hoover Institution and a Professor of Economics at the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California. Dr. Henderson, are you there?
Yes.
All right. I want to jump right in because this is very important. A few weekends ago, when most great patriots were at the CPAC, known through Lou Rockwell as Crazy People at a Conference, you were at a very, very different, very important event called Across the Political Spectrum Against War and Militarism. Can you tell me something about that?
Right. It was organized some months ago, and the idea was to get people from, quote, the right and the left together to talk about something they might have in common, namely their opposition to the current wars we're in and to basically most of American foreign policy for the last many decades. It was titled, as you said, Across the Political Spectrum Against War and Militarism. I didn't totally like that title because I'm not against war. As I pointed out in the piece I wrote about on antiwar.com, I've just been against every war the United States has been in since 1783, with the possible exception of World War II, and I'm not even sure of that one. So what I'm getting at is I'm not a pacifist. So I just think that you can avoid war in almost all situations and do better. And so I figured I was close enough to what they were after that I would go to that thing.
Well, we interviewed Kevin Zeiss and David Beto here last week, and there's many luminaries. But give us a little bit of a feel for what happened at the conference, what you all concluded at the end of it.
Well, the idea was to get people talking whom, my late friend Roy Childs said once in a letter to me, haven't been talking since World War I. And granted, everyone in World War I is dead, but what he meant by that is left and right really haven't talked to each other much since then. And so the idea was, hey, why don't we try to get together? Let's see if we have something in common. Let's see what we can do with it. And where we got was that we have a lot in common. Where we didn't get completely is what do you do with that? But I think that will happen. I mean, with email and phone calls and every other thing, I think we can start being in touch with the various people there. So what happened, and what I was worried would happen didn't happen. What I was worried would happen would be that people would strut their stuff, that everyone would try to distinguish himself or herself, it was mainly men there, so I'm going to say himself for shorthand, by basically emphasizing the things that they knew other people wouldn't like. And I saw very little of that. It was a much more mature, much more get-to-the-point meeting than I had imagined it would be. And so, usually at a one-day event, it's probably mid-afternoon before you've gotten past all that stuff and you're able to talk to each other. I thought we got there pretty early in the morning, and that was just incredible to me. I think I'll take a little credit for that. There was a man there named Murray Pulner, whom I met the night before, who was written on antiwar.com. He's probably about 80 years old. He and I really hit it off, and he said, good things about antiwar.com, and then I just had a great conversation with him the night before. We both disliked Rudy Giuliani and loved the way Ron Paul nailed him in the Republican presidential debate. And so that morning I asked Murray if he would help me lead a song, Viva la Company. It's an old song that I learned at this event a couple of decades ago, and it's just a kind of a bonding song, and it worked, I think. I think people, I'm not saying everyone got into singing it, but I'd say two-thirds of the people did, and it kind of helped maybe overcome what otherwise might have been some bumps.
What do you see as the end goal of this particular coalition?
The idea of maybe working together to oppose these wars, and by just working together, just that alone, if people identify themselves with their particular ideology and the fact that they're working with others, it can reach out to people who neatly categorize anti-war people. So you'll have the right will neatly categorize anti-war people as being left. The left will often categorize right-wing people or libertarian people or conservative people who are anti-war as being kooks. And so the idea was to try to, I think that what we could do is effectively at times talk about how, no, we agree on these things. I agree with Ralph Nader on these things. Ralph Nader can say he agrees with David Henderson on these things, and so on. Or he can say he agrees with the editors of the American Conservative on these things. A couple of those editors were there. And so that can just keep people's minds open a little longer than otherwise, because minds shut very quickly to hearing the message. Well, gee, that's interesting. Why would left and right agree on that? And then you can kind of make the case. So that's what I'm seeing. Now, one proposal that was made, and I don't think it went anywhere, but I thought it was a good one, was I think it was the editors of the American Conservative who suggested we could write a joint editorial with the editors of the Nation and publish it in both publications and say, this is being published simultaneously in this other publication. And I think the American Conservative editors went for it and the Nation editors didn't. I don't know. I wasn't party to what might have happened after that if they talked among themselves, but I thought that was a great idea.
It sounds actually like a wonderful idea, and
yeah.
I would, of course, love that if I could see these big names on an ad in America's Prava, the New York Times, of people who are saying no to war. Anthony Gregory was in the interview prior to this one, and he mentioned one of the things I've noticed when reading the various articles on this particular conference is there's a lot of representation of the left, but I'm not hearing much about representations of actual liberals. And Anthony had made the point that liberals hate the Tea Partiers more than they hate the war. What is being done to do outreach to moderate liberals on this?
I don't think a lot. And I think through the people around the room, I don't think there were that many moderate liberals. But I think there's a reason for that. My guess is, because this was organized over a lot of months, and my guess is that they looked at the list and found not that many people who could both qualify as being liberal and really in a principled way against these wars. That's my guess. But I don't know.
That's a damning statement, but I'm afraid it might be true.
Yeah.
Now, there's going to be another conference in the fall, so this is an ongoing project.
Oh, there is? I didn't know.
Oh.
Maybe I'm not invited.
No, I did a little fact-finding mission this week in D.C. myself, and I went to the offices of the American Conservative as part of that and spoke to Ms. Hopkins. No, this is absolutely a very, very exciting project, and I hope to do little profiles of all the different people involved, perhaps Jesse Walker next week, to encourage to bring excitement about and bring a coalition building. But what's interesting, and I know Scott hates when I go off on these biographical tangents, but you're not just an academic and intellectual, but you're an activist yourself. I mean, you've organized peace events in Northern California, and you've been a long-time libertarian activist on these issues. Right.
So yeah, a little about that. Actually, peace event. I organized the anti-Afghan war demonstration in the last fall in Monterey. And it was I'm co-chair of a local group called Libertarians for Peace, our local chapter here, and as co-chair, I'm on the steering committee of the Peace Coalition in Monterey County. Now it's about 28 organizations, almost all of them left, some of them liberal, and one libertarian group. No conservatives on it. I haven't found any conservatives interested, although I keep looking. So anyway, I proposed this demonstration. Everyone said great idea, but no one wanted to organize it. So I felt like if I don't do it, it's not going to get organized. So yes, I did that. My other big thing, though, which goes way back, was in '79 when Senator Sam Nunn, a Democratic senator from Georgia, was really pushing hard to reinstitute the draft. And we had just gotten rid of the draft in 1973. And I had followed the issue. My boss at the Graduate School of Management at the University of Rochester, my first academic job where I was an assistant professor, was Bill Meckling, who'd been executive director of the Gates Commission that came out against the draft in favor of moving to an all-volunteer force. And I'd learned a lot from him about the issues, so I actually gave some speeches on it and testified before Senator Sam Nunn's subcommittee. And so that was where I would think was most active. And then, as the rest of my life, I was kind of getting married and having a kid and getting tenure and this and that. But then I got back into it in 1990, when Bush made clear that, yes, the Cold War is over, but we're still going to invade Iraq. And I wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal saying why you could not justify that war on grounds of getting oil, because the cost to the U.S. economy from Saddam Hussein having somewhat more power in the U.S. in the world oil market was very small. And so that was where I kind of got back into it.
Isn't there an ethical issue, though, with fighting a war for a commodity?
Oh, sure. But I was trying to talk to people who don't get too upset about that ethical issue to say you don't even have an economic basis for this.
A little point of libertarian history, because I know Rothbardians of my generation tend to be a little snarly about Milton Friedman, but you wrote a brilliant article about Milton Friedman ending slavery. If you would elaborate a little bit for our listeners.
Yeah, Milton Friedman was a longtime opponent of the draft. His major first step in that a lot of people forget now was there was a conference on the draft held at University of Chicago in 1966. And by the way, Angela, this is an example where there was a kind of a uniting of left and right. So one of the bad guys at this conference was Senator Edward Kennedy, who wanted to keep the draft. And the good guys were people like Milton Friedman, John Kenneth Galbraith, who didn't show up, but at least they were able to quote his opposition to the draft.